Hi, and welcome to Toni Time. Well, we have a guest that has been here a couple of years ago, much too long. He must come back again. Gilbert is back. Gordon,
hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's been too long.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Last year I had the bad leg. That was one reason why I didn't come up.
Okay, well, we have to not let the time go that long between
no more
shows.
bad legs.
No. So what have you been up to?
Well, it's doing the same thing in the West Village where you originally, or were from for a good while.
Oh, yeah.
And the West Village in Manhattan, New York City.
Yeah.
And producing and directing programs celebrating different poets and writers. And every September now for about 5 years, a special show, Remembrances of 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
And I get writers, often each year there are a few who up until then couldn't really deal with it publicly.
Yeah.
So we get them to come on and basically nobody memorizes. They just read to us their own remembrances of that day, if they were here or elsewhere in the country or wherever. And after a few years of not doing it, I put my play on again, the end of June.
Did you win an award?
I wish.
No, I thought you sent me an email. You were acknowledged.
Well, from time to time, the different things like a particular poem that somebody liked and they published and that sort of thing. I still haven't reached the point of publishing myself.
Why?
Too many good things to do, and that's work. I mean, that's serious work. If you're going to publish a book, I don't want a book of poetry that I self-publish and have 200 copies still in my closet that I haven't been able to give away, after all, family and friends. So, but I am almost ready. I've been working with this wonderful artist from Brooklyn who a series of short poems, 20 in all of them are first-person narration by different night characters of New York. It's called Noir Cityscapes.
Okay, so explain to the audience night characters.
Meaning people who basically live their active life at night in New York City.
Okay.
So we've got everybody from police, firemen, and garbage collectors to the 7-Eleven guy from Pakistan, of course, the hooker out on the street, the cab driver at night, the night messenger with his courier bag on his bicycle, different people.
That's interesting.
She's created, for each of the 20, she's creating a charcoal sketch that's basically very dark. And so we're putting it together. I can only afford one a month from her, so we've been doing this for over a year.
Okay.
But, January or February, I'll get the last sketches and then start putting it together as a book and
that'll be
see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
But other than that, as I said, I don't want to do something half-heartedly. Just get a book published and say I have a published book.
Right.
So when it's done, I expect to promote it as much as possible.
Of course.
And that's work. And I'm retired. I'd rather not be working, thank you.
Well, yeah.
And the things I do, besides writing and performing myself, are a lot of work, but they're fun.
They're fun work.
Yeah, and putting on the play is always a nightmare, but it's fun at the same time.
It's like a wedding.
Well, it's a nightmare because it's called Monologues from the Old Folks' Home, and it's 17 different characters, each by a different actor.
Wow.
And having that many actors in a play, there's always a few who, at the last moment, cancel because they got something else they have to do, or emergencies, family. And then I tear my hair out, who am I going to get to replace them now, at the last minute? And of course it happened with 3 this year. but it worked out.
Explain to the audience how you started within this business.
Well, one day, first of all, I retired completely in 2008. I semi-retired and got my pension in 2000, but I kept consulting. 2008, up until then, I was doing amateur photography in my spare time, and I'd written a few things that I never really did anything with. And I saw this ad on the side of a lamp post that said there was a poetry reading at the church up the street on Sunday afternoon. So I took some poems I wrote, and I went. And it was the first time I had performed anything publicly, and the response from the audience was terrific. And you know, applause is very addictive. I started writing more, performing more. I reached a point where I started branching out from poetry into other writings. I found this wonderful program once a month in my neighborhood at the Cornelia Street Cafe called Monologues and Madness. And Tulis McCall, a wonderful, hilarious writer herself and performing her work. Well, I started writing a lot of monologues.
Yeah.
After a while, they weren't poetry anymore. And I found, though, that with something that happens when you reach the age where we are now, your parents, parents and relatives and old friends are in rest homes.
Yeah.
And first I found it very depressing, but in some cases, let's start with the depressing. I started writing a lot of very depressing monologues about growing old. And then my girlfriend, Mary Jane, got on my case about it and found this wonderful book for me by a doctor down in Miami, a psychiatrist at the largest home for the aged in Miami, Mark Agrenin. And he wrote a beautiful book. Now he has a second one out, I heard, but I haven't got it yet, about the good side of growing old. And there is a good side. There are a lot of good things. So I started writing some monologues that were not all sad and depressing. And then, I got the makings of a play here. And since I never studied theater or anything like that, this was for me a way in the back door.
Right.
Because they're all monologues. That means no stage direction necessary, and it means no dialogues. It means you don't have interaction between characters. So I would say I patterned it a little bit on the Vagina Monologues, which is similar.
Right.
And I had a play, and it was well received. In the beginning, it was only about 8 monologues, but now it's worked up to 17. And I was one of the main characters in the early productions, gave myself 4 or 5 monologues. This year, last June, I cut it down to 1 so that I could expand it with other characters.
Okay.
And it went over very well again. So that's what I've been doing. Now I've already got to start thinking about September because the next Remembrances of 9/11 show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, is it to the point where, for the 9/11 show, people know you're doing this and they come to you, or do you have to promote it?
Well, I always have after the first few, I've always had more people who want to do it than I have time for. It's an hour and a half or so is what we're allocated. And
for the whole show?
For the whole show, yeah. Well, you start late, nothing starts on time. And then we have to be out because another show's going on later. So it works out to about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It's a 2-hour slot, but we never really get to use the 2 hours.
Okay.
And so I've had a lot of fun with it, but This last time I did it, I purposefully excluded anybody who had done it before.
Yeah.
So we could get new voices.
Right.
And of course, a few people complained, but they didn't have anything new to say. They would have just said the same thing they already said. And I have found that some people afterwards found it very special in a way for themselves, because they finally got out some things that they hadn't been able to get out. A lot of people in New York City are still having a hard time dealing with it.
I know. I mean, I was there when it
There.
happened.
Yeah, I was there too.
Yeah.
Didn't know you then.
Nope, we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
But we lived like I was on
About
Bethune Street.
5 or 6 blocks away.
Yeah.
But that's New York.
But that's New York. You can be a block away and not know somebody. I mean, I go back now, and I went back in November for like 4 days. And I always go to my old neighborhood. I go to my coffee shop, the bus stop coffee shop, which is right on
Still
Bethune.
there.
Yeah.
Still there.
Still there.
Yeah.
My waitress is still there. And I see people who used to live in the same building as I did. Nobody knows I moved. They all think we're on different schedules.
Yeah, which could be. Yeah.
Which I love. They don't realize 10 years have gone by.
Yeah.
And I love that about New York.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
But when 9/11 happened, I watched everybody come together. I watched all the people, that never come out of their apartments, and they were all coming out because they didn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
You were there, all the cafes had free food, free coffee.
Yeah.
On Houston Street, if you looked down, you saw World Trade.
Yeah.
Just a pile.
Yeah, and the smoke.
And the smoke, which came right into my apartment and everybody else's.
Well, I always have had a problem with smoke in general, allergic to it, which kept me from becoming a cigarette smoker.
Right,
positive.
true.
But I got out of town.
Oh, did you?
I was in town when it happened, but I went west about 300 miles for a week because I knew that the smoke was going to come north.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, and
Yeah.
and even so, a lot. Well, now we know so many people who were involved with the cleanup have had cancer and other things happen.
Yeah. A lot has happened to them.
Yeah.
But what was your take on 9/11, Gordon?
Well, there's so much out there in terms of conspiracy theory. I still have a hard time thinking that it was all accidental because, first of all, the government deliberately ignored all the warnings because there were warnings from the intelligence community.
Yeah.
They sent somebody to see Bush on his ranch the week before it happened, saying this was going to happen, and he did nothing.
Yeah.
And then what has never been explained is how that other part of the World Trade Center, I guess number 7, was not touched by the planes, and it was not next to those buildings. How did it fall down?
Yeah. Well, they're always saying it was like when the other buildings fell, it shook that one and it fell. That was the
Yeah. But also you do hear that several thousand across the world, people who are building engineers and architects and such, have signed off on something saying, no way could it have happened the way that they said it happened.
Right.
So you have to wonder. But then if you like conspiracy theory, you can go back to many other things in our lifetime. JFK's assassination, Kennedy's assassination.
Sure.
Robert Kennedy next, and Martin Luther King. And in every case, there have been people who say, no, the person who got blamed for it wasn't really the one who did it.
Probably not.
And this is just a little on the side, and I know we don't have an awful lot of time, but you may not have been aware of this. Sirhan Sirhan, who is supposedly the one who killed Robert Kennedy.
Right.
He came up for parole again.
Oh, did he?
He did, and he's come up several times, and each time, of course, no way are they going. But this time, one of Bobby Kennedy's closest friends and who worked with him and worked for him and was next to him at the time that it happened and was himself injured. He was shot, and he was shot by Sirhan. But he showed up at the parole hearing to testify that he was there, and he said that, yes, Sirhan did have a gun, and he did get shot by Sirhan, but he said the shot that killed Bobby Kennedy did not come from that direction, and it did not come from Sirhan.
Wow.
And of course, the media totally ignored this. I didn't see it in the New York Times. I didn't see it in the TV or anywhere. No, they just ignored this totally because it's against the official story, and nobody wants to dig it up again.
Yeah.
But Bobby Kennedy made more enemies than JFK.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because
definitely
he was cracking down on the mob and other people. And there were, people talk about a deep structure. I don't know if there is that, but there certainly are people out there who seem to eliminate people who want to make too much change.
And if they make too much noise.
Yeah. And Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
He didn't get assassinated until he turned from civil rights to being against the Vietnam War.
Right.
And starting to speak up for people in unions. He was there in Memphis because of the one of the unions that he was supporting that was on strike or something. I don't remember all the details. But as long as it was just civil rights, nobody wanted him dead that much. But, you go against the government on something like the Vietnam War.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that there's stuff like that happening.
All the time.
And we'll never know for sure.
We'll never know for sure, and I've always felt any president who came into office, I think over the past years, promises have been made with different countries, all kinds of deals.
Oh, yeah.
And you come in and it's everything you campaigned about that you want to do, you find you can't do.
Yeah.
But you don't find that out until you're elected.
Well, we could say even more about that, but now we're getting into a
whole
different subject.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, I know you have written new monologues.
Well, I brought some of my monologues, not any of the new ones, but I also brought some other things. My father lived to be 98, but he died last July. And I wrote a few things about him that I would like to share. And then after that, some more stuff about growing old, not necessarily monologues.
Okay.
And then if there's time at the end, I'll give you a few of the monologues from the play, including one that is definitely on the positive side.
Okay.
So
Let's begin, because I know the audience loved it last time.
Well, this first one I wrote some years ago, actually back in 1995, when my mom had died about 6-7 years earlier, and we were concerned about my dad living out in the country all by himself.
Yeah.
And I went out to see him in February of that year, and I wrote this thing, so I'll read that first. It's called Winter Spell. And my father's place, I now own it. It's in the Finger Lakes. He left it not too long after that. It was a big house, and he got remarried, and they moved out. But then I retired, so I was able to buy it. And I have the house now, and I'm glad I do, in the Finger Lakes of New York. Winter Spell. This morning I have walked the land encompassing my father's house, my heavy boots through the snow, breaking a perimeter along the edges of the property. My breaths as incantations are transformed. From my mouth at first hot vapor turns to tiny droplets in cold air, then once again to vapor, dissipating, conjoining, and commingling in the air that rises in the morning sun above my Father's land. All is brown and gray and white within the circle I have drawn about my Father's land. All is brown and gray and white within the chant, within the winter spell I cast, protecting all from pain and harm. Above, a gray hawk circles in slow spirals, and I, neck arched, eyes fixed upon its outstretched wings, mouth forming rings of vapor condensing in the cold, crisp air, I weave a net of charms that rise, conjuring, embracing that proud bird within my circle, and joining it to keep a watchful eye over house and frozen pond, fields and vineyards of my Father's land. Greyhawk, I have conjured you as familiar, kindred spirit, sacred totem creature. From my distant home, as I lie sleeping, dreaming, I shall look with your sharp vision down upon the winter-frozen landscapes of my Father's land, made sanctuary, until warm breezes break my winter spell and signal my return to walk again, this time with incantations of the spring. So
Wow.
That was back in 1995. And this next one, I don't have the date on it, but this was just a few years ago. This one's called The Long Goodbye. Distant from me now, though as close as a phone call, I see him as often as I can. And as we dine, a breakfast place for dinner, no molars left, he still enjoys the eggs, hash browns, and waffles. I ask him for more stories of his childhood. Some I've heard 100 times, but like as not, he often will surprise me with something good that I've not heard before. An old man with good genes and no bad habits, not like his sons. No, all of us came up with our bad habits on our own. He looks so old, so fragile now, and speaks in such a quiet, raspy voice. Just turned 96, and Doc says he's in good health. Still growing flowers, fruits, and vegetables. Writes short religious poems, one each day. Granted, he hits the mark one time in 40. Each time I can travel all that distance, well, I don't get all emotional when we say goodbye, but each time I am so aware how old he is. This man I love, my dad. I tell myself perhaps, no, probably I'll see him yet again. Next time I would like to ask, but only when his young wife's not around. Tell me, Dad, again, how you met Mom. That's how things stand these days for Dad and me. It doesn't happen all at once. This is the long goodbye.
Beautiful.
Now, I'm going to skip ahead to something that I have here,
Yeah.
which, did I put it in here? No, maybe not. All right, we'll skip by to see if there's time.
Okay.
I did put together, my sister and I each put together a book of poems the last year of my dad's life, his poems.
Okay.
He gave us each about 100 short religious poems, and I went through them and put them together into a book using Amazon to publish the book for him, and he loved it. But only one page of verse out of 100 pages of poems that I really liked the words.
Yeah.
And that's in there somewhere, but I thought I'd put it here. I didn't. If there's time, we'll get to that.
All right.
Now, we're in a beautiful place here.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, Biddeford, Fortunes Rocks, Biddeford Pool.
Yeah.
And for over 40 years, my folks, they got a place a long time ago when it wasn't terribly expensive in Fortunes Rocks. And we've been coming here a lot, so over the years, every summer. So I wrote a few things that were about this area, and I thought I would include them.
Oh, please do.
Some of it's my imagination, but this first one was written just last May when we came up here. Greeting the morning. She awakens me before dawn, and together we walk down to the beach, the moon setting behind us in the west, the morning light revealing our path through the dunes. We reach the white sands and walk down to the water's edge. A soft offshore breeze pushes small waves to the shore where they gently crash. Gulls glide over our heads while tiny shorebirds on spindly yellow stilts swiftly advance and retreat just ahead of the water that approaches and recedes with each wave's collapse on shore, stabbing their pointed beaks at sandbugs hopping on the wet sand. We stand here, arms wrapped around each other as the sun first breaks above the horizon, far above the blue-black ocean that stretches out to the east from where we are, standing, watching and waiting, holding each other close and closer in the moment together. And this one is more imagination.
Okay.
I don't actually have a rowboat.
Okay.
Row to sunrise. I wake, though all around me still lies sleeping on this late August early morn, still full moon lit. I rise and think the morning perfect for it, not the slightest breeze ruffling the leaves of our maple trees. The first faint colors edge the eastern horizon out over this quiet ocean. My eyes on the dark path through the dunes, I go down to the water's edge before sunrise. No breeze, no waves. I launch with just a push off, jumping in, gliding away from the shore, but not enough, so pushing on one oar, I turn the bow more before I push both oars together, lift and glide, and push again to lift and glide. I'll go a mile or so before the coming dawn. The salty air tastes sweet and life is good. Ahead, the skies look fair. Behind me now, the night gives way to the gathering light as I row out to meet the rising sun. I'll stow the oars a while to watch it rise. But in good time, that done, I'll rest my eyes and back toward shore I'll turn, making my return, with the sun warm on my back, pushing me home.
Beautiful, Gordon.
And that was daytime. Now we have night.
Okay.
And this one I wrote last June. We two nights walked north on the beach. By the way, this is a beach you know very well.
I know.
Fortunes Rocks.
Yeah.
We two nights walked north on the beach as the setting sun descended over the darkening beach houses beyond the dunes. We turned around when we came at last to the rocks where the white sands ended, the beach now greatly narrowed by last winter's storms that took the sands away. We walked south now back to where our right-of-way to the beach could be seen between two houses, the red wooden steps now black in the darkness of a still moonless night. Reluctant to leave the beach on this last night walk before returning to the city tomorrow, we sat upon a driftwood log heaved up by one of those winter storms and waited, our ears taking in the quiet crashes of small waves still faintly seen below us at the shoreline, our eyes anticipating the first glint of light that would soon illuminate the horizon, presently still merged with the blackness of the night sky. The heat of the day upon the land pulled in a cool ocean breeze, and we were glad for the warm sweaters we had thought to wear on this late May evening. We leaned into each other, neither breaking the silence, and waited, You saw the light first, I a moment later. Then at last, as it had the night before, a full moon rose, oh so slowly, above the dark horizon, and upon the sea laid down a path of light, almost but not quite to the shore. Instead it ended not far out, at its own reflection half as bright upon the sea. I thought about the two orbs, one the sun's reflection, the other a reflection of a reflection, as if remembrance and then reflection upon that remembrance. At the end, that's all that's left to us. In the end, it is enough.
Yeah.
And, okay, here they are, my dad's poems.
Oh,
They were hiding.
okay.
There was only one whole poem that I liked, but I took parts that I liked the most from some of his poems.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you each one separately,
Okay.
parts. As each tomorrow comes, it soon becomes our past. It's how we live these days and reveals what will last. Another poem. It's hard to understand the workings of the mind and why by word or deed we often are unkind. This is something I sometimes forget to do when I have a program.
Uh-huh. It's okay. I've done it many times, Gordon.
So I'm turning it off.
Okay.
Where were we? Oh, yes. It's hard to understand the workings of the mind and why by word and deed we often are unkind. Why do we wound someone with careless word or deed and often turn away while they will hurt or bleed? And from another poem, who has not felt alone along the path of life and faced some loneliness amidst life's pain and strife? You know we need some help along life's journey too. You also need to know that others still need you. The songs of brotherhood we seldom hear today. Around our weary world, the songs of hate hold sway. This is a fact of life, how clearly it appears that some live more in hours than others live in years. We try to measure time, dividing time with tense as future, past, and present, but this makes little sense. Tomorrow still will come, today's will never last, and now won't pass away to be buried in the past. Life's road is seldom smooth. Sometimes we lose our nerve. We get less than we want, though more than we deserve. And this final one, I like this whole poem. And by the way, I never mentioned this time, my dad was a Baptist minister.
Oh, okay.
That's why he wrote religious poetry.
Okay.
This one is called Hosanna to the Lord. Hosanna to the Christ, ride on to Calvary. Thy path is covered well with our hypocrisy. It isn't palms that lie beneath the donkey's feet. His way is covered well with garments of deceit. Hosanna and crucify within the human heart. May after all you know lie not so far apart.
Your dad was pretty good there.
Yeah. And of course we all mourn when someone we love dies.
Sure.
And I wrote this after my dad's death. I wanted to address that problem. So this one's called Bittersweet. You may avoid grief for a while, push it into the corner where you store all those other painful thoughts you hope to bury with neglect. But sooner or later, like or not, it will come out. Better far to meet grief on your own terms. There is indeed such a thing as joyful sorrow. Grief tempered by fond remembrances and gratitude for what once was, yielding gravitas, acceptance of the present, so you can move on walking hand in hand, if just for a while, with grief as your companion, and time your friend. In time, opening your heart again to intimacy, and bringing acceptance of your own mortality, and of a life, though often bitter, also sweet.
Gordon, they're beautiful.
Now, do you want to hear about getting old?
Oh, okay.
Okay, this one's called
All right.
All My Aches and Pains.
Okay.
Once my aches and pains were infrequent companions, occasional guests. I'd anticipate their arrival a short while after episodes of great exertion, usually after pushing myself far too hard, carelessly reckless, ignoring the warning signs my body gave me. But in a few days, these visitors took their leave, as all good guests should, never staying long nor wearing out their welcome ere they said goodbye. That was in my youth, back when I was in my prime. Healing took less time. But as it happens, not long ago, all that changed, these guests returning far more frequently, though I no longer tested my body's limits. They made their way much more often to my door, staying far longer, though less welcome now. More recently, aches and pains accelerated their scheduled visits, intervals growing shorter, stays even longer, once measured in months, then weekly, and now just days. I realize now they have come to stay, and so, most unwillingly, I am their landlord. They behave rudely, their demands unreasonable, now that they know I can't evict them. My body is their schoolhouse, and I'm their student as they school me now on my own geography. So much to be learned about my muscles, cartilage, tendons, and joints, taught by aches and pains. Taught to medicate with soothing liniments, creams, ointments, heat and cold, but to no avail, as my suffering got worse, then unbearable. So I sought relief from this school of aches and pains by playing hooky, taking painkillers. And aches and pains went away, but never for long. My new friends, these drugs, these thugs, were not strong enough. I soon needed more. I began to drink to numb the pain that returned when the drugs ran out. The future looks bleak. The only choices left me are moment to moment. All I can ask is, let me make it through this day, just another day. That is all I ask. Can't think about tomorrow. Not now, anyways. In my younger days, I thought I was immortal. I felt so alive, so healthy, so strong. Aches and pains just came and went. Life was wonderful. That was what I thought. But now, I stand corrected. I'm not immortal. Once they came to stay and refused to go away, all those aches and pains. Ever since that day, I'm daily reminded of my mortality. I've had a good life, but maybe I've lived too long, and now my life is hell. I used to fear death, but death promises an end to my suffering. I'm at my wit's end. More than drugs or alcohol, death may prove a friend. Now, I did exaggerate there. I'm not feeling that bad, but I was thinking more of some of my friends who are in that kind of bad shape.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know what this one was doing there.
Well, now, a part of your play.
Yeah, that's what I'll put up next. All right, this was the first one that started the whole idea of the play. And this one is the main character, who I made a minor character later, myself. Yeah. And his name is Pete. His wife died some years ago. He dearly loved her, but he's horrible to everybody else. And he also is very independent-minded and doesn't want, the last thing he wants is to go into a rest home, as you will hear.
Yeah.
The Eskimos. When I was young, they were called Eskimos, but now we are supposed to call them what they call themselves. I guess that's fair. But I'm too old a dog, and at my age, I never can remember that name I should use now, so please allow this old man to use the word he knows, the Eskimos. They say when there is not enough for all to make it through a hard and bitter winter, they put the old one out into the cold. They say that all agree, both young and old, that this is both the best and only way to assure that the rest survive till spring, and that's the important thing. Not being farmers, storing up good harvests, what little they can set aside each fall is not enough to guarantee survival. Dependent on the hunt for their subsistence, they count on luck as much as skill, but also on good weather. Harsh winters can demand a harsh triage that all must accept because there is no choice when you are starving and running out of options. Well, these days I no longer think that Eskimos are heartless to their old. They are less cruel than some families today that I know who are well off and certainly not acting out of desperation faced with sure starvation. They would send us off once we are old and helpless, someplace where they don't have to think about us, to linger on under the care of others, drugged to ease our pains and dull our minds, alone among a multitude of others like ourselves, along with those caregivers, strangers all, who will be our only solace, with family absent, the closest thing to friends until we die. Please, if it comes to that, let it be winter. Give me my coat and hat and scarf and gloves, and do not come to look for me till spring. Just let me lose myself out in the cold. So, now, this is a woman, and this I took from Mark Agrenin's own stories. He had to basically interview everybody who came in when they came in, and he heard this woman, elderly woman, was coming in who had admitted herself, and her husband, after 40 years of marriage, her husband had died. So when she came in, he was, I'm sorry about your loss. Well, she wasn't sorry at all. And I'll let the monologue tell the rest.
All right.
It's called Heaven. And pardon my singing voice. Heaven, I'm in heaven. And my heart beats so that I can hardly speak. And I seem to find the happiness I seek. I just love Irving Berlin. Not like that man I married. 60 years of fixing meals for him and everything done just the way he wanted, and still he criticized me night and day. Never had kids, though we both wanted to. Claim that was my fault. If you ask me, it could have been him just as easily. 40 years we slept in the same bed, and 40 years he took me any time he wanted. Satisfied himself, but never me. Then one night, he couldn't get it up. What a blessing that turned out to be. Way too proud a man to see a doctor. My fault, of course. You know that he blamed me. Said, since I was so useless now, we might as well have separate rooms. I just said, thank you, Jesus, silently. That man had snored so loud some nights I scarce got any sleep. But I was raised up never to complain about your man. My mama always used to say, just count your blessings, though they may be few. There's other folks that's far worse off than you. But now he's gone at last, and I am free. No reason I could see for me to stay in that big house all by myself up on the hill above the town. I sold it. And I took myself to Serendipity, the old folks' home. No more cooking, no more cleaning. I can read or watch TV, take a bus to town to shop or see a movie. And gosh, so much to do here. I'm learning how to draw, and just last week, I threw a pot. There's dancing every Wednesday afternoon. Some folks here can't stay up late. And also Thursday evenings after dinner for us late-nighters who stay up till 10. You know that man not once in 60 years ever took me dancing, and now I waltz, square dance, and cha-cha-cha. And there's this man I'm seeing. Folks say he's mean. It's true. He is that way with most folks here. He's always saying how he hates this place, but he's sure sweet to me. Says a pretty woman stole his heart here, meaning me. He always says the nicest things. Too bad he's in a wheelchair. We can't dance. He says he only comes here so he can watch me cut a rug out on the floor. Says I got a pretty figure. I always sit by him when the music pauses or when I just don't feel like dancing. Sometimes, you see, I need to catch my breath or my feet get tired and hurt. Then he insists I put my feet up in his lap and he gives me a foot massage. Oh, we are such a scandal, but I don't care. He talks about his wife now and again. She died some years ago, but he still loves her. His marriage was as good as mine was bad. But now, we're both at serendipity. He's my beau now. Sometimes he holds my hand, and I am so happy. Everything is just the way it should be here at Serendipity, and I'm in heaven.
Gordon, that's just, everything is just so amazing. And unfortunately, we're running out of time, but...
Well, I'm glad I was able to get that in.
Oh, I mean, I just get lost in your voice, your words.
Well, you got to come down sometime and see the play.
I know, and I will be in New York in December around Christmas.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you'll be doing anything at that time.
I'll think about putting it on again.
Yeah, that's the plan. A dear friend of mine from San Francisco. She's coming in with her husband. Her husband has relatives in Connecticut. So instead of coming to see me in Maine, they're going to go to Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come up and we're going to have a few days together.
That's great.
But my God, Gordon, that just takes your breath away.
Well, we get a good reaction every time we put on the play.
But it's the way you deliver it. It's how wonderful you are.
Well, fortunately, I have a lot of wonderful poet friends and actors who can read it just as wonderfully, because I only read one.
Yeah, but I'm sitting here and I'm getting choked up and certain things you're saying, and I can apply it to like my own mother, who's in assisted care living.
Yeah.
But it's just, you are such a talented man.
Thank you.
You're such a creative man.
And it all comes down to seeing a flyer on a lamppost. Otherwise, I'd still be doing just photography.
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, your words are just, I mean, they really grab a hold of your heart.
Thank you.
They really do. And, you know, I want to encourage, Biddeford, there are so many creative people.
Yeah.
Young and old alike. And some of them think their time has passed, or they don't think they have time to make a new start to something else. But you are just proof that you can do anything you want to do.
Well, I really didn't get started till I was in my 60s.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an example that I love everybody in our viewing audience to see and listen to you. That's why I love having you on my show.
Thank you.
Because you're an inspiration to everybody here. And our time has run out.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I had the time.
I am glad.
Toni.
And don't make it 2 years again.
No. We'll try to do it more often.
Yeah, a little more often when you come in.
And new stuff. I'll bring some new stuff.
Great. I mean, this is, I know the feedback I'm going to get on this is going to be wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody for watching our show today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And so until our next show, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.